let's say you ordered one of these, you know, maybe you already got a grubby one, and you decided you wanted to upgrade to the Piggy Back shelf, which is a good way to go. That does mean you have to put it on, you have to mount it. And here's how you'd mount it. You take this part, and put it right here. We're going to put this flush right across here. Now, the key here is there's a little bit of slack. This camera can see it okay, but you want to split the difference in the slack. So I have as much slack on this side as that side. That's the first thing you want to do. And then we want to split the difference in the slack here and here. And that means that this is going to be in the center. Yeah, once you get it all mounted where you want it, then of course all we have to do is drill pilot holes that are appropriate to whatever screws you use. You don't want, make sure you don't use screws that are too long and go through the other side, because that'll poke you when you're carrying it. So you definitely don't want too long screws. I use these, which are 1-inch deck screws, if you will, or drywall screws. Used to be able to get them at both Lowe's and Home Depot, but for some reason they decided they wanted to stop carrying them. And in fact, I just ordered a box of 8,000 just to make sure I had enough to do kits and that kind of stuff with. But when you order one of these by themselves, I send you screws for this. So, and this is what they'll be. So you use a pilot drill that will do that. I have already countersunk it so that when you stick that baby in there, you know, you might have to do a clearance hole on that hole right there. Now the one last thing I want to show you has to do with this swivel support. Put the swivel support down here, no problem. The way it works, of course, I've shown you that before. You have a swivel dowel, which goes through this way. You have a support dowel that goes through this way. Okay, now, situated like that, this would be a toothbrush holder. Now, when we use it for Piggy Back shells, we have to move it. Up to the top set of shelves. So the key here is that sometimes this won't fit because, you know, when you drill holes like this, I mean, even though you drill them exact, the problem you have when you're working with wood is sometimes your bit will get carried one direction or another as you start to drill. And so even though the dimension was right, you started it right, you know, the wood might try to take your hole one direction or another, which means that it's not exactly where it needs to be. And this is one of the big problems we have in woodworking anyway is, you know, you'll do everything exactly right and it still won't necessarily come out right because, well, it's just not a perfect world. So the way you fix that in this particular case, and it can be off either direction. It can be off to where when you put this in, this thing is sagging down too low, or it can be off so you can't even get it in, which is the case here. You see what happens is when we put that up, you see that's off quite a ways. So you take your pencil, pull it up, and I'm going to mark right at the top of this hole where the top of that hole meets this piece. And that happens to be right there. So I'm going to mark that, and then I'm going to put a line on here. And in order to get rid of what really amounts to some amount of this, about that much, what I'll do is I'll just run the table saw blade up to where it's high enough where it meets the top of what you need to do, and then just take a saw kerf that goes that high. Then you take your sanding paper and sand both channels. In other words, you're making a groove right down through here so that it's compensating for the fact that it's not a perfect world and it didn't come out exactly the way we want it to. Now the other condition that you can have, though, is it hangs down too low, and this probably happens to me more than anything else these days. And in that case, what you would need to do is you'd need to take up some space. So the way to do that is you just glue a thin piece. This is too thick, but I'll just use it to illustrate the point. You glue a thin piece to this piece, and that will take up the slack. Now, I'll glue one on that's a little big, and then take it to the belt sander and progressively start sanding it down until I get just the right kind of fit. And you can make it fit, you know, what you want is you want it to come up, be exactly to the top, nice and solid, so that it holds whatever's sitting on it. But at the same time, it's not hard to get the dowel in and out. So it's kind of a gentle proposition. You want to sand it down until you get both of those conditions. It holds it all the way up to the top, but the dowel still slides in and out fairly easy. And that will make you know, that part a pretty easy proposition. Now, down here, if you're using it down here as a toothbrush holder, that's where you use these holes and put toothbrushes in there. But when you're doing a piggyback shelf thing, you use it up here. These holes are useless. They don't be any good at all because you're using it to hold the shelf. So, okay. I think that's what you need on a piggyback shelf. I hope it is, because I really need to be done with this project. Anyway, later.